Hey, wherever you are in the world today, I welcome you to another 30 minutes of impeccable soul care here in the YouTube world. This is my soul practices page, and I'm super honored to be spending some time with Reda Rackley, aka the Bone Woman. Reda and I were talking a minute ago, and I really stressed the importance of sharing people's messages, and Rita's is a message that really needs to be heard. So we're going to have a conversation about that. Rita is a diviner, and her background is quite varied, including studies in mythology and psychotherapy.
Depth.
And she's going to give us some deep down to the bone ideas, as she says, to chew on. So welcome, Rita.
Thank you, Teri. It's a pleasure to be together again. And I just have such deep respect for what you're doing and your commitment to bringing these voices to the world. It's quite amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Really, it's an honor for me as well.
Soul practice, and I'm in awe of you. So thank you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. That's why we're gathered here. At another time, we may meet around your stone circle. I feel like that's a good place to begin sharing your insights. Let's give the listeners, the viewers, a little bit of insight about your stone circle and how that came to be.
Oh, wow. Well, the dream time has led my life. I've had, I would say, 3 what Jung called the big dreams that literally changed the directions of my life. And the stone circles was one of them. So I had a dream that there would be 13 stones placed in my backyard and that I would bring women there to do ritual healing work. And I had traveled over Ireland to visit all of the stone circles a few years before and just felt the ancestors in those stones, felt the magic in those stones, felt all the rituals that had happened for thousands of years in those stones. And the dream came, and I had a friend who was a designer, architect. And I ran into him down at the ocean one day in Carmel, and I told him about the dream. He was a mystic architect. He had done some work around our house, and his architect came from dreams and visions too. So we could speak the same language. And I said, Dave, I had this dream about these 13 stones and doing the ritual in my backyard. And he says, well, I'm just finishing a project down the road, and I have these leftover stones. Would you like to have them? And I said, are you kidding me? And he says, yeah. He says, I can't use them. I don't know what to do with them. And I said, absolutely. So the day comes, and this huge truck, I don't know the tons of it, but this big crane on the back of it. And what I thought to be these nice sized stones ended up being these nice sized boulders. And so they had to take down my fence in the backyard. We got out the compass, and we did all of the directions to make sure they were lined up in the right directions. And so that's how the circle of stones were birthed in my backyard. And I've done baby namings in the circle of stone. I've done marriages in the circle of stone. My husband's elder initiation was done in the circle of stones. A lot of women's rights and rituals. So, it's powerful, what I call neural mama medicine.
And I love that. When I first saw the pictures of them, it reminded me of Stonehenge. And I remember watching an episode of The Highlander, and the main character came out into a circle of women in the stones. And every time I see the images that you post of your circles, that's what it reminds me of. And just that calling and that welcoming and that celebration of the divine in all of us.
Yes, yes, yes. And
Yeah, it's beautiful.
you've got Celtic background, right? Um, Irish.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
stirring that ancestral memory. It's stirring how our
yeah,
mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers all gathered in those circle of stones, and it's primordial. It's a homecoming. It is. So,
yeah, it definitely is. Yeah, interestingly enough, one of my cousins died in November, and her daughter gave me a box that had been passed along, like from my great great grandmother, then my great grandmother, then my grandmother, to my cousin, and to my cousin's daughter. And my cousin's daughter felt like there was so much power in it and so much history that she needed to pass it on to somebody that would really appreciate it. I felt totally honored, but you brought up that Celtic history, and there's just so many stories in this box about the women in our lineage, and I'm sure at some point they gathered like that.
what a gift.
Oh, it is amazing. It's truly a gift. Okay, so you said you had 3 dreams. That was one of them. What was one of the other dreams?
Oh my goodness. The other dream was what I call the keeper of the faceless women. And it was a
Mm,
dream about a year before I traveled to Africa. And it's not
mm,
a long dream, so I'll briefly tell it. Is I'm back in the hometown where I grew up in Cairo, Georgia. I'm at a street fair. I'm standing on the main street, and I look down the main street, and I see what I thought was a little child, and that it was standing there by itself, and I thought it was lost. And I start walking towards this little child, and as I get close to it and I bend down, I am looking at the oldest face I have ever seen in my whole life.
mm,
It had so many wrinkles. You thought you were looking at an ancient stone 1 billion years old. And I'm looking at her face, and all of a sudden I look up, and there are 3 women standing there. They're very tall, skinny, and their faces disappear and they turn into a new moon, and then this veil gauze falls over their face. And I look at the old one and I say, what happened to their faces? And and yeah, a piece of that was that their faces had been eaten by worms, and then it turned into a new moon. And I said to the old one, what happened to their faces? And she looked at me and she said, I am the keeper of the faceless women.
mm,
And like it was one of those dreams that just feel when I tell it, it's like it comes all the way back. And
mm,
um, it was a dream about me going to Africa and learning about the ancient little people, which they call consultation there, which in their culture they are very, very old and very, very wise. And my encounter with some very amazing things that happen in the caves in Africa. But my work has always been about remembering the faceless women, bringing
yeah.
back home to their own knowing, making sacred women's grief, betrayal, abuses, and ritualizing that, and then letting them rise up and be reborn. And so now it's like when I tell this dream, it really is about the crones now and the faceless women of the old women who disappear in our culture and have a lot
Mm,
to say, and why I'm such a voice for the crone and for being seen and being visible. So the dream continues to lead my life, and I've worked with it. I've
mm,
written it. I actually had a story that was published about this dream called The Keeper of the Faceless Women. And so, yes, it never goes away. Like
Yeah.
it keeps coming back, So,
Mm.
yes.
I love the way that you show up in the world and how you share your passion so authentically and so deeply and honor every woman, no matter where they are in life, no matter what they may be experiencing. You honor every woman, and it makes me feel emotional. I was fortunate enough to have a divining session with you, and I've always connected with my grandmothers. After connecting with you, I connected in a whole new way, right? Even by your guidance, going to the cemetery, the boneyard, and sitting down with my mom and many of the other grandmothers that are there and seeing them, witnessing them, hearing them, knowing that they hear me. And I thank you for that, for opening my eyes to a new way and celebrating that. And your pages on your websites and in your art, you can tell how you are hearing those voices and interpreted in the stories and the poems that you write and the art that you paint.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That touches my heart too. Thank you.
Yeah.
The stories of our mothers, our grandmothers, our great grandmothers, they're in us. They're in us.
Mm-hmm.
Their tears, their sorrow.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I'm the generation, and maybe you too, we're living the lives our mothers and grandmothers never really could live. But it was their birthright.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's about getting free of all of those cultural shackles and stories and all that shit never belonged to them or us in
Mm-hmm.
the first place. I think, Teri, what if every woman, and I'm going to say woman born, came into this world with her gifts fully welcomed, was seen, cherished, and then someone actually helped cultivate those gifts? What kind of world would we live in now? Would we be dealing with climate change? Would we be dealing with the amount of abuse towards women? If each woman came
Mm-hmm.
into this world to live her birthright. And that's what really,
Mm-hmm.
that is what I do. My medicine, my art, my divination, everything is about reflecting back to a woman, her divine self, her soulful self. And how it's like, come play, come out into the world. And if we got to do
Yeah.
some healing work before we get there, let's do that. But it's an invitation to come home to your deepest, down to the bone, soulful self. And that's why you and I are talking today.
Yes, it is. It is. And so much more, right? I can imagine that. I can imagine that there will be a generation of women that comes in that way, and I can imagine celebrating the women of my past, not just my lineage and my ancestors, but all of the women. Like, I can imagine seeing all of the women that have ever lived connecting in a new way on the other side of this reality and being honored for who they really are. And I do see a time. I see a time where women will be honored. I took a class a few years ago, and one of the questions in there was, what was your favorite TV show growing up? And I remember Wonder Woman, and she came from a planet of Amazonian women, right? And another one, it was like the power of Isis. And I think to myself, that's the power that we as women really can give ourselves. And with your work, my work, the work in the world that are really seeing that for women, it is possible. And I can see that in the future.
I love it. I'm holding that vision with you. I'm holding it with
Yeah.
you for my granddaughters.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. I feel like it's going to happen. It has to happen in order for this type of planetary existence to continue on. It has to happen.
Agreed.
So, okay, let's talk about divination. Let's talk about divination and how you show up in the world and the difference between divination and maybe traditional shamanic or mystical teachings.
Okay. So 25 years ago, I was blessed to meet Malidoma Soulmate, which crossed over last year, December 9th, and was blessed to learn the ancient art of cowrie shell divination and was taught this system of reading the bones and stones and cowrie shells. I'm sitting at my cloth, that's why I'm looking down. And in essence, it's working with the elements, working with the spirit of water, the spirit of nature, the spirit of the mountain, the spirit of fire and the ancestors, and the earth. And so I spread all of these objects, then I'm reading the configuration, and then rituals rise up from what I'm reading. And I feel like my grandma Grace, was what they called a granny witch, that my Celtic ancestors were also diviners. They read signs. Divination is about reading the signs, and it's about reading the constellations. It's about reading the clouds. It's about reading the same. It's like being in touch with the elementals. And so it's being in co-creation with all of cosmology. And I feel like for me, because of my ancestor lineage, that the women were diviners, that I feel comfortable saying that word. For some reason, the word, shaman, I don't feel like that was a word used in my ancestor lineage. So I choose not to use that word. And I know there's a lot of hot debate out in the world about that. And I'm just being true to what's true to my bones. It's magic. It's all magic, no matter what. And it's magic is about, the word magic, it means to bend or to shape shift into the other realities so that you receive wisdom from the other realities. It's, it's like the Celtic people, the world behind the world. We open the veils and we do this dance together, and we bring the wisdom from one world back to this world, and then we ground and anchor that wisdom in a very rooted, grounded way. So it's an invitation to play, to remember, like as a child, when you would go out in the woods, or you would sit there and you would get lost in the timeless time, and you would talk to your invisible friends. All of that's still there, but we grow up and we say, well, we have to put away those childish ways. But this is one of the things that, Malidoma said to me, is that we each come into the world with a spirit that follows us, and we forget about the spirit, but the spirit never leaves us. And once we start to co-create, like when I'm in my studio, I totally feel that energy coming through me. Or when I'm at my cloth, it's not just me, it's me being grounded and rooted enough to welcome these other energies to come in, to play with me, to bring wisdom so that it can spread into the world and we can dream another world. I don't know if that answered your question.
Absolutely, it did. Yes, absolutely it did. And I've said many times throughout the last 13 years on my podcast that it's also similar and the language is different. So, divination and showing up as a shaman. And yes, it is magic. It's all magical and mystical. And the language that you choose to use is as individual as you are. Right? How you incorporate it, though, using some of the teachings of Malidoma and still connecting with your own ancestral lineage, makes it as unique to who you are.
And that for me is really, really important. I was blessed with a map that was given to me by an African elder, but I'm very clear that my ancestors are the ones coming through me to help me read this map. And I am
Mm-hmm.
forever, ever grateful to Malidoma, all of his ancestors, and to my ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
What my grandmothers and great grandmothers couldn't do, the great, you would be burned at the stake if they were doing what I
Yeah.
was doing way back then, you know. So I
Yeah.
am remembering what my lineage had to forget and then got demonized. So it's a homecoming.
Yeah.
Homecoming.
Yeah, it really is. You know, I have family members who were burned at the stake. I have my husband found a picture. I don't even know how he found it, but he found a picture of one of my ancestors, like my great 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 aunt or something, that was literally in one of those shackles that they used to put on a woman's mouth, and that they would parade them like a dog through town to say that, you know, this is not how you're going to be. And then she was killed. So I feel that with you 100%. I feel that with you, that they come through, you know, that
Yes.
they're so happy for us to finally be able to be in a place
Yes.
where we can speak it without having to worry about being burned at the stake.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And it
it's,
also brings deep compassion for the lineage. You know, I get
yeah.
this question a lot when I do divination, you know, because the foundation of this work is your relationship with your ancestors. And a lot of, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to say, Western folk, American folk, why would I call on my ancestors when they did so much harm to other people, where they traumatized, you know, family members? And why would I call on them? And I said, well, this is what Malidoma said. And Malidoma said is that when they get to the other world, they turn around and they look back and they see the sorrows they left behind, but they can't interfere unless the living is willing to reach the hand out to the dead.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so that the next generation doesn't carry the trauma that maybe you carry and the ones before you carried. And that's called ancestral reconciliation. And I said, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been pretty much my whole life. And then I also want to
Mm-hmm.
share too that, you know, I had a session with a woman the other day who's have some real difficulty with her mother that's showing up in the world. And I said, you know, it's not time to call on her. You know, it's like, it's okay not to call on that ancestor. We go back to the original mother. When it is time and you are
Yeah.
ready, you are strong, and you want to get free of carrying this, then it'll be time. But you can't push the
Yeah.
river. You know, it's you
Well,
can't push the river. It's like going to forgiveness too fast. So I want to
mm-hmm.
understand the paradox of that, because it's an and in
Yeah.
both.
Well, and we do have to be true to ourselves as well, you know? So that was a beautiful way to present that with her. And there was a time long ago, I believe, that that kind of stuff didn't happen, you know, that humans honored each other, that humans honored the earth, that humans didn't violate each other, and that they were lived in a sense of symbiotic union with the earth and nature and the elements, and that we are coming to that place where we see that, you know, that we know we have to get back to that place. And I don't know what the answer to the reparation is, but I love that you told her that there's time and maybe that this isn't the time, right?
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was
and
really beautiful.
that's the beauty of divination, is like when you're reading the objects, it's like all that information just, you know, comes up for me. So And also the
Yeah.
beauty of divination is like, someone that's had, and every one of us is dealing with trauma. I mean, so much trauma, ancestral trauma living in these times. But that's the beauty when I send someone to the ocean to do rituals, or
Mm-hmm.
ocean is so vast and so big and so powerful that it has the capacity to help hold some of that trauma and transform it. When I say to a woman, go to the ocean, and I've taken so many women, and you're going to unveil all the way, and we're going to walk into these waters together, and I'm going to hold you and baptize you in the name of who you are, and we're going to let go of all
Mm-hmm.
the shit that you've been carrying and your mama carried and your grandmama carried. We're going to give that to the waters. We're going to make offering to the water spirit, and you're going to come up out of these waters and be reborn and step out on that sand and say, hallelujah, I get to be reborn. And we all can be reborn over and over and over again. And we can't do
Mm-hmm.
it alone. We can't do it alone, which is why I love what you're
No.
doing. This messages that you go out into the world, they go out into the world, and we can't, you have to have a holy witness, and that's another conversation.
Yeah. Well, let's make sure we have that conversation and talk deeper about the holy witness. We
Yeah,
do need that.
yeah,
We need to be cradled in love. I think it's so beautiful that you walk these women to the ocean, and I love how you presented it as a baptism and really bringing them back to love, to being held, to being honored for who they are. Thank you for doing that.
yes. It's our birthright.
Yeah.
It's our birthright.
Mm.
I have so much love in my life that it's really easy to give it away. I am
Mm.
so loved. I'm really, really deeply loved, and I have so much to give away.
Well, I love you. I'm so glad that our paths crossed. I'm not even sure how they crossed. An invitation to join your circle somehow from somebody, and whoever that was, I'm so grateful to them too, because it's just been so beautiful experiencing your presence and your work and your sense of love and passion. Really
Mm,
beautiful.
thank you.
So thank you for that. Well, we're just about down to the wire. Wherever you're watching this, you obviously have an internet connection. So I'm going to put my glasses on to visit um, thebonewomanspeaks.com and connect with Rita. Connect with her art. Her art is on Big Cartel, and it is amazing. I feel like when I look at your pieces, I can hear them speak. Whether you post a description about them or not, I look at them and I can hear them speak. Your work speaks to the soul, to all of us, and I'm so grateful.
I love that. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, and so what would you like to leave the listeners with today?
Well, as in my divination sessions, I always sing a spirit song, and that spirit song is for that person. And it is to anchor what needs to be anchored in the bones, and the rest of it can fly like an eagle. So I would love to share
Mm.
our time together and all of your listeners to allow the spirit song to penetrate their bones and to remember how precious they are. So I will start.
Thank you.
Ese makuye ye ye ye. Ese makuya ye ya so. Oya maya, oya maya. Oya maya, oya maya. Ese maya. And all the women walked in a single line, and they were singing their song and saying, we're going home. We're going home to the place where we belong, that we can be our down to the bone self. Ashe.
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 Thank you. Mwah. That was beautiful. And go out and enjoy the day. Enjoy your grandbaby. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Rita.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hmm.